Cek suara Mas Asep.
Iki tekan agak jumlah kan?
Hmm?
Tekan agak jumlah.
Ini,
Ah,
ini boleh. Kan toh. Ini kerja tidak apa Bung.
C, 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 C.
Cek 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 cek. Nah, tes.
from his Wikipedia page. Because it's very rare for us to have guest lecturer, a visiting professor who has his own Wikipedia page. So if you look at his page, he is an Australian chess player and also an economist who holds the title of Grandmaster. So he is a serious chess player and he is also an academic economist, professional economist. So also he is the seventh highest ranked chess player of Australia and has played for the Australian team in the chess Olympiad since 2008. Currently, he affiliated with the University of Queensland in Australia with areas of research in economics, economic development and growth, experimental, behavioral, and evolutionary studies.
I think there's a sound coming out of here.
I'm gonna ask,
Can you mute it or?
You will be stand for approximately 75 minutes.
Yeah.
A bit less than 1.5 hours. And during this presentation, you can always ask by raising your hand, and you can do the Q&A during this talk. And if you are not confident in speaking English, jika Bapak Ibu semua ada yang tidak confident, tidak pede berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris, silakan bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia. Nanti saya akan bantu terjemahkan. Okay, but it's gonna be better if you speak English as a part of your training English faculty. Okay, I'm gonna present.
I only have USB-C.
On experimental
It's okay. I'll just use this.
on
I'll just use
case
this.
diagrams.
Is it on? Okay. Is it? Can you hear me okay? Is this? Okay, thank you. Okay, ready to go. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's my first trip to Indonesia. I've been here for 6 weeks now. What's that? Enam Minggu. That's about as much Indonesian as I can speak, unfortunately. So please excuse my Australian accent. If anything's not clear, feel free to ask. Yes, thank you very much for the warm welcome, and I've really enjoyed my stay here. What I'll talk to you today about is okay? One moment, please. I think it's working. Oh, okay, thank you. What I'll talk to you today about is dishonesty and cheating. That's a bit of a strange topic to think about from an economics perspective. We'll talk about why economists should care about this topic and why policymakers should care about this topic in a moment. But first, thank you very much for that really nice introduction. But I also had a slide kind of related to myself there as well. Who am I? I won't go over what was said before, but one thing that you'll notice is that the topics that I work on don't really seem like they have anything to do with the economy. And that's true. I'm a very strange economist. And this is kind of relevant for not just your degree now, but also your career afterwards. The real value of economics as a degree is not learning about the economy. It's the methods. The methods in economics, and I'm a bit biased, but I'll say this, are the best in the world because we can apply them to any topic and we have value. And in fact, we probably have the most value if you're the only economist in a room of non-economists. And I like that feeling. It makes me feel nice and useful. So I work on topics where I'm typically the only economist in the world, and this is one of them. Okay. Seeing as this is about dishonesty, I'm going to start by being dishonest and telling you a lie. But I'll also tell you 2 truths. And you have to work out which one's the lie. I don't know if you have this game in Indonesia. It's very common in schools and universities in Australia, the 2 truths and 1 lie game. You can try it with your friends next time, actually. It's quite fun. The way we're going to do it is I want you to use your device and go to this website. Now, if you don't have QR code, you can just type in menti.com. It'll ask you for a code, and you put in the code 78540758. But I'm pretty sure in Indonesia, everybody knows how to use QR codes. It's much more common here than Australia, I think. Okay. Now, to make this work, I have to disconnect the screen. So quick, last chance to get the QR code. Great. Okay, disconnecting the screen now. Didn't mean to do that. That's okay. Now, on your devices, you should see 3 statements. The statements are, sorry about that, sir. Thank you. The statements are, I was on a reality TV show. I can run a marathon in under 4 hours, and a park is named after me. And your job is to guess the lie. Can you see it on your screens? I can see that a lot of people have voted and a lot of people haven't. And I guess that's because it's not so easy to work out. But here's the thing. Even if you just guessed randomly, we would have a draw. We would have a tie, me versus you. But if the number of people who got it wrong exceeds the number of people who got it right, I'm the winner. So even if you just managed to guess randomly, we should draw. So if I win, that's pretty amazing. Shall we see how we went? Okay. Oh, I see what I have to do. I have to now. That's what we guessed as a class. 10 people said he was never on a reality show. 22 people said, that guy, he can't run a marathon in under 4 hours. And 28 people said, no way is a park named after him. Well, the truth is, I cannot run a marathon ever. So 23 of you were correct. But unfortunately, suddenly 24. Hang on. But unfortunately, I am the winner. So it's difficult. It's difficult to get truth from lies. But you might say, well, what's the point of being able to tell honesty or not? What's the point of even studying this as economists? Well, the truth, the honest truth, is that dishonesty and cheating costs our economy a lot. In the US, which is where we have the most reliable data about a very unreliable topic, the taxed gap, that is the gap between what the IRS should get and does get, exceeds $350 billion US dollars every year. But more than that, employee theft and fraud is estimated at $600 billion US dollars a year. Putting it all together, if we could increase honesty, which sounds like more of a psychological or moral problem, the US would have, without any investment in labor or capital or technology, an extra $1 trillion a year. So that's a reason for us as economists to care about the topic. But honesty exists to some extent. We do feel a little bit bad when we lie, even as little kids. Why? This is one of many questions that I will ask you as a class because I'm more of an interactive speaker, shall we say. So as an economist, explain to me why honesty exists in our society. Why do we think as a society it's good to be honest? Why do people do it? Any suggestions? The first question always takes the bravest person. To get a good reputation. So by being honest, you build up a reputation that might have value in the future. Makes a lot of sense. Why would it develop as a norm in the first place? What about if we think about it from, say, an evolutionary perspective? We go back to hunter-gatherers. Wouldn't it make sense to be dishonest just to earn as much food as you can for yourself? Wouldn't survival of the strongest say that those who are dishonest and earn more food for themselves and more resources would be more likely to survive, and therefore in our DNA we should have a trait of dishonesty, right? That seems to make sense. So why would we have evolved a trait of honesty? What's missing from the story? It's a tough one to think about. But one argument that's been put forward is that we are not individual agents in the way that a microeconomic framework says that we are for individual decision making. From a very early period in human development, from the earliest hunter-gatherer civilizations, we have relied on groups to survive. And this gentleman's comment here about reputation is very, very strong, because if you cheat your group and take a bit more food than you're supposed to have, you've increased your fitness, so to speak, for a day, but your reputation's taken a big hit. You might be kicked out of the group, and individuals find it harder to survive than groups. So over time, those who are honest and build up those reputations are more likely to survive as groups. Or another way to put it about reputation is put forward by the great philosopher, Captain Jack Sparrow, Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean, who was in a court case after he was, you might know this, he was caught as a pirate, and they're having the court case, and if he's sentenced, he'll be sentenced to death by hanging. And in his defense in this legal arrangement, he makes the claim, you can always trust a dishonest man to be dishonest. It's the honest man that you should not trust, but you never know when he would be dishonest. But there are other reasons for us to care as economists and policymakers, and that is there's a very strong link between the honesty in a society and its growth, its development over time. There's a very strong link between how much you trust strangers in your society and the acceleration of GDP growth within that country. And also, if we look at the relationship between global corruption scores and how that affects growth, it's very, very clear that those higher corruption scores lead to long-term hindrance of growth. But let's go back to the micro level. I'm a microeconomist by trade, so let's start at the individual level. What are some models for lying or cheating or dishonesty? Well, there's that evolutionary argument that it's been passed on through the survival of groups that were honest, that we now just have these heuristics, which are rules to live by that say lying's bad, trust other people. But then there's the economic argument, which is that before making every decision, there's a cost-benefit analysis you do. How much can I gain from being dishonest versus what's the probability that I get caught? And what's the punishment if I do get caught? And so we might argue that in some societies, people don't steal because the risk of getting caught is quite high. And if you're caught, the punishment is very high. But if we take that selfish rational agent model, there's a very clear implication. And that implication is that if the benefits of being dishonest go up, at some point they'll be so high that you will be dishonest. And that's quite a strong assumption to have. But we can't test that assumption. We can't measure it because it's really, really hard to get good data on cheating and dishonesty. It's kind of a paradox because if there is a situation where we can observe dishonesty and cheating, then people aren't going to do it. People only cheat and are dishonest if they don't think they can be caught, which makes it super difficult to measure anything. Now, maybe we could just ask people and hope that they are honest to answer about their dishonesty. Does that make sense? I don't know. Let's see. We'll do another question. Now I need to move this. No, I don't. I can do this. That's very smart. Okay. I'm not going to ask you this question, but imagine that I did. Imagine I said, hey, who in this room has ever cheated on an assignment or test using AI, using ChatGPT? Put your hand up if you've ever cheated in front of your lecturers and put your hand up. Imagine that I asked that question, which I'm not going to ask because I don't want you all to chase me down after the lecture. What percentage of students do you think would put their hand up? Do you need the QR code again? Yes. So I don't know how many students we've got in this room. It's not 100, but let's imagine it's 100. How many do you think would admit right here, right now, to cheating with AI? Let's see what we think. We as a class have not reached a consensus. Some people have said 100%. Now, I don't know much about Indonesian culture, but I certainly know that if I tried this in Australia, it would be much closer to the 0. In fact, I did try this as a little experiment, perhaps not very ethical, but hey, it's about dishonesty anyway. And we got one brave student who I quickly told to put down their hand because I was hoping it would be 0. I think it's going to be very low, but here we can see that most of the answers are down low, or some have put it really high. Okay, so that makes things tricky for us. That makes things tricky. We can't just ask people. So what can we do? How can we get some accurate data? Say we're interested about this question, which your lecturers and your university are interested about this question now, thanks to ChatGPT. Well, one way we can do it is to try to do it anonymously. So you'll notice that in this little platform that you're using now, this web app, it is anonymous. You've all signed in by the link. I can't tell who you are. Nobody, you'll be happy to know your lecturers also can't tell who you are. So I'm going to ask you the question anonymously, have you ever used AI to cheat on an assignment or test? And I'm going to hide it so that you can't see what everybody else is saying. And I want you to answer it. Have you ever used AI to cheat on an assignment or test? And I promise you, as much as you can trust an Australian stranger standing in front of you, I promise you that I cannot tell who you are. It is truly anonymous. All right, let's see. Oh, before I show you, we are going to do the next question. Hang on. We are going to do the next question, he says. The next question, you'll see it on your devices now. Guess the percentage of this class that said yes to the last question. Guess the percentage of the class that said yes to the last question. You should be able to see that on your devices. Sorry that I have to keep jumping between screen and screen, but I hope you appreciate it's slightly tricky to manage. So, our guesses, once again, are all over the place. We have some zeros. We have a bit of a bunch around 10%. We have a pretty big bunch around 50%, which usually means people who don't really have a strong opinion, so they go for the default. Some around 75 and some around 100, I'm sure you're all eager to know the answer. It is around, what's that? Around 60%? Around 60%. Which is actually not too far from what the median guess was. But the distribution of guesses was a little bit all over the place. To be expected. That's tricky. But here I've got another question for you. Are you sure we can trust those results? Can anybody think of a reason why your classmates may still have answered no, even if the truth is yes? See a few people nodding. Can anyone explain to me why that might have happened? I see so many people nodding, which means you must know. You just don't want to say. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about those other classmates. Well, here's one explanation. The psychologists have given us this explanation. That admitting to something dishonest, even if we don't think we're going to be caught, gives us a psychological hurt. The economists would say a disutility from lying. And if you are a person with some moral code, it's likely that you do feel a little bit dishonest, a little bit hurt from being dishonest. There is another issue, which is that if we try to ask this question in the field, for instance, the IFLS survey, which many of you are familiar with, or the Indonesian census survey, we can't really anonymize. We go around to the house, we spend 2 hours with them getting all these questions, and at the end of it we say, oh, and by the way, have you ever cheated on your taxes? You know, it's very difficult to find a way to anonymize. So this is a challenge for us to do as economists. So how do we solve it? What's the explanation? Well, this is the value of experimental economics. Now, it's something I'm going to talk about a little bit in what follows, but there's certainly going to be more opportunities for you in your studies here at UGM to learn more about this field. Experimental economics has great power in many domains, but especially when it comes to understanding cheating and dishonesty. One of the first papers to do so was written back in 2013. Now, that's actually not that long ago. I'm sure for you it's all very long ago, but for the field of economics, that's very recent. This whole literature on understanding cheating and dishonesty is essentially only a decade old, which means that it's very fertile ground for new research topics by intelligent and motivated students. So keep that in mind. Let me tell you what they did. They did this in a lab, which is where most experiments are done, but we'll talk about some field experiments later. And they did it in Switzerland, which is why you have this weird currency here, the Swiss franc. And you sit in front of a computer with some barriers so that your neighbors can't see you, very important. And you've got a computer with an Excel spreadsheet for you to fill in. And you've got a cup and you've got a die. 1 die, 2 dice. You know these things? Roll them and get a number from 1 to 6. We all know what they are. And here's what you're told to do. You roll it, nobody can see you. Roll it 10 times and just enter into Excel what you got. And we'll pay you according to what you got. If you roll a 1, you'll get 1 Swiss franc. 1 Swiss franc is like $1 US. If you roll a 2, you get 2 Swiss francs. If you roll a 5, you get 5 Swiss francs. If you roll a 6, you get nothing. So just fill it in, then click submit, come to the front, we'll give you your money, you walk out the door. That's it, the whole experiment. Very simple. The way that this is set up means that your chances of getting caught are very close to 0. In your physical domain, you can see that you're not going to get caught. And there are no incentives to being honest, but there are very clear monetary incentives to being dishonest. even though the researcher can't tell what individuals do, they can compare the group average against a theoretical benchmark to see whether or not there's any cheating. On the left is what the theoretical model would say if the entire class is honest. You're rolling a die, the chances of getting a 1 is 1/6. The chances of getting a 2 is 2/6. So this is what the distribution should look like. On the other hand, if there's full cheating, then everybody will say that they rolled a 5 every single time. And this is what the distribution should look like. And this is the point behind experimental economics. It's the same as the sort of experiments that they run in pharmaceutical labs and in research in medical fields. You have hypotheses and you design the experiment so that you can either disprove one or disprove the other. And what did they find? This was the result. The lowest or the least frequent number that was rolled was a 0, much less than 1/6. The most frequent was a 5, the highest paid, much more than 1/6. But we're not getting exactly the left and we're not getting exactly the right. We're getting something a little bit strange. And most importantly, I want your thoughts about this question mark one here. Why are we getting so many 4s? Can somebody give me a theory? Now, this one isn't about your own behavior for cheating, so you've got no excuse to not answer this. I've got a room of smart people. Tell me, why are we getting 4s? Please. Sorry, it's hard for me to hear. Can you shout it a bit? Everyone's afraid to get caught. That's a really good, sorry, I should have mentioned about the microphone before. Thank you very much. That's a really good comment because everyone's afraid to get caught. So it would make sense to say you rolled a 4 if you thought for some reason that the experimenters were going to have some secret cameras focused on the people rolling 5s. That could be. That could be. So now I want another explanation, and I'm going to say, let's imagine that the conditions were so clean that there's 0 chance of getting caught. And I'll tell you exactly what I mean. Someone had that exact explanation that you said there. So well done, because other very smart academics and you, same mindset. When they saw these results, they said, well, what if they just think there is some chance of getting caught? So they did the same thing, but they did it online. So you're at home in front of your own computer. You're told to get a die and a cup and roll it there and report back. Nobody can check. You're in your own bedroom. At least you hope there's no cameras in there, right? And yet we were still seeing some 4s. So now I need another theory. What's another theory? And it can't be to do with the probability of getting caught. Let's go back to that intrinsic feeling that you might get. Yes, please?
Maybe they think F5 is too much, so lower the standard to 4.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. Do you want to elaborate, or is that?
Yeah.
Their heart is not. Yeah, yeah. The microphone died halfway through, but I understand exactly what you're saying. So that hurt, that almost the evolutionary disutility that we get from cheating is a bit lower. So we like more money, but somehow cheating to the maximum hurts us internally, intrinsically, which is very interesting and unexpected from an economics perspective. And it's important that we as economists try to understand this, because if we just use our classical models of reward, punishment, and risk, we're missing a big part of the picture. Okay. What was really important about this study, though, more than anything else, is that this very clever idea of self-reporting through rolling a die gives us a method of eliciting the group average honesty, which means now that we have a tool, we can add in treatments and explore the impact of treatments on that honesty. We can have always a baseline group. We know what the baseline distribution will look like. We just saw it before. And now we can see what happens if we double all the payments or triple all the payments. What happens if we do it before people go to the midday prayers versus after they go to the midday prayers? What happens if we do it a group full of men versus a group full of women? What happens if we do it a group full of Master of Economics students versus Master of Philosophy students? We can test all these things now that we have a tool. What that means is that this one paper in 2013 gave us a blueprint which has led to, by now, more than 100 different studies that use this as the benchmark for testing our understanding of dishonesty and cheating. And if you wanted to do this in your thesis, for instance, you would probably start with the die under the cup task, as it's called, as your benchmark method to test something. Interestingly, as far as I can tell from the literature, despite there being more than 100 studies that use this method, I have never seen a single one done in Indonesia yet. You could be the first. But okay, let me give you one example of how this has been used, which I think is kind of cool. They wanted to know about parents. What makes parents more honest or not? And they did some examples of the die under the cup, where the parent was by themselves or whether their child was present. And they did it where the money would go to the parent or the money would go to the child. And they found that parents became more dishonest if it would benefit their child more. So there's some sort of moral trade-off. I need to provide for my children. I'm willing to take that hurt because I can justify it because I'm helping my children. But interestingly, if your daughter was watching you, you were much more honest. If your son was watching you, So there's a lot still to explore here, and it's kind of interesting. Now, this is all part of experimental economics. I've prepared some slides about what it is. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly, but don't worry, because these slides will be made available for you to read later. So don't stress about writing this down or taking pictures or anything. What is experimental economics? And most importantly, why do we need it? It can really be summed up in this picture here. Helping to move a truck. If we use observational data and we try to make a claim that X is causing Y, we run the risk of accidentally identifying a spurious correlation. A very fancy phrase that is basically the man in the red shirt standing on the truck. It's not really doing anything, but it looks like it's doing something. With experimental economics, we can get to a causal effect. And that's very important. Now, some examples of correlations that are spurious. This is true in the data. Higher ice cream sales are associated with higher children's sunburn in Australia. Yeah. Therefore, the policymaker should ban ice cream, correct? This is a nice one because it's actually quite clear what's going on. You can look at this and you can say, hang on a second, these are both happening. It's summer. They've got nothing to do with each other. There's something else going on that's causing this. So we can identify it. But when you're using a big data set like the Indonesian census data or IFLS, you don't always have the luxury of understanding what this spurious variable is. And that can be quite tricky. Experimental economics helps us to solve that problem. We create an experiment where we've got sometimes even what we call a laboratory. And a laboratory basically means that everything is controlled. And we introduce an X variable into one group that doesn't go into the other group. And then we see what happens to the Y variable, the outcome variable. And if the Y variables are different between the two groups, we know that the only thing that could have caused it is that X variable. Now, in the hospital, that X variable is a new drug, a new pill, a new treatment. Here, our treatments aren't medical, but they're our item of interest that we care about. Now, of course, you can try to do these things empirically using data sets like IFLS and others, but then you need some sophisticated econometrics. It's much cleaner and easier if you can do it in the lab. So the big advantage is that it establishes causality, a causal effect. Change one thing and leave everything else equal. But just because the statistics is easy doesn't mean that the method is necessarily easy. To run a good experiment, you need all of these things. Now, some of these you're familiar with. Research question, hypotheses. Of course, you'll have to do this in your thesis. But you also need to recruit your participants. You need a good experimental design that keeps that control and introduces treatment. And in economics experiments, you need incentives. We don't trust surveys, but we do trust people's love of money. So if we can find a way to get those things to line up, truthful answers with money, then we're much more reliant on the information. So a question is, that nice, neat little game with a die under the cup, has it got anything to do with honesty in the real world? Maybe people just act that way in the lab, but it doesn't have anything to do with the sort of behavior we really care about. How can we internally validate it? There are a couple of ways that this has been tried because we need to know that our method is valid. The first one was done in the Netherlands. They played that die under the cup game that we just saw, but then they did something else. They sent the money, rather than going to the front after you entered your numbers and collect the money, they said, give us your bank account details, we're just going to transfer it. And then they accidentally, on purpose, transferred you an extra €5, right? And they wanted to see which of the participants would write back and say, hey, you accidentally gave me too much money. And they found that the ones who wrote back were the ones who reported lower rolls, more like chance. The ones who reported, yeah, I got all fives, they didn't write back about the extra money. So it seems that real world behavior is correlating with the tool. But can we go even further and validate it in a more real setting? A couple of French researchers tried this in the metro system, particularly in the city of Lyon. Now, in France, they have a real problem with people not paying for the metro, not paying for the subway. And so what they did was they stood at the entrance of a metro station. People got off the train. And as people got off the train, they had their little lab set up there. Come here, roll the die under the cup. Tell us what you got. How many fives did you get? They got all the answers from the people. And then right at the end, they said, now show us your valid ticket for the train. And the people who said, oh, I don't have a valid ticket, were also the ones who rolled the most fives. So our method is valid. The die under the cup correlates with real world behavior. But somehow, I know some of you might still feel that this die under the cup feels just a little bit too artificial. You want something that doesn't have any lab at all. You want something that is what we call a true field experiment. The problem is that true field experiments, and I've run many in my time, are super expensive. So we don't do them very often. But just because I know that's what you want to hear, I'm going to show you what I think is the coolest field experiment about cheating and dishonesty. It's called the wallet study. And it appeared in the journal Science. It's very rare for an economics paper to appear in the journal Science. So if that happens, it's got to be pretty cool. Let's see what they did about civil honesty around the globe. I'm not going to read out the whole thing to you, but I want you to notice this figure down here. To run this experiment, they use 17,000 wallets in 355 cities across 40 countries. And what they did is that they got poor student assistants to help them, of course, and they went around in these cities to civic institutions like museums, police stations, post offices, banks, and they turned in the wallet. And you as a student, if you were helping in this experiment, you could have been part of the Indonesian study, and it was run here as well. You had a script you had to read from. Your script said, "Hi, I found the wallet around the corner. Somebody must have lost it. I'm in a hurry. I can't get it back to them. Can you please take care of it?" Inside the wallet would be a key, a grocery list, 3 business cards in which was the address of the person, very important. Of course, it was a fake address, so we could get the wallets back, but whatever. And either no money, treatment 1, $13 US, treatment 2, or $94 US, treatment 3. And these amounts were varied relative to the country. So that sort of made sense according to the richness of the country. So these were the US amounts, okay? Then the researchers sat back and waited to see how many of those wallets would make their way back to them. It's a very, very clever experiment. And these are the results. On the x-axis, we have the reporting rate. How many of the wallets came back? The y-axis, we've got the countries in quintiles quartiles, sorry, for how often they were sent back. And for each country, you've got 2 dots. You've got the darker dot where the wallet had money and the lighter dot where there was no money. Now remember, according to the classical model, the more money's in the wallet, the higher the incentives to be dishonest. So we should expect the money one to be on the left, keeping it for ourselves. That's the classical economic model. In almost every country around the world, it was exactly the opposite. Now, this is not my study, so don't get mad at me, but you can see Indonesia on the list there. It is not on the right of the axis. It's a little bit on the left. But forgetting about that, let's look at the difference in the Indonesian dots. And it's a pretty big difference, you can see. It's probably one of the largest differences there, relative also similar to the Australian one, which is sort of up the top. So on average, adding money into the wallet meant it's more likely that it's going to be sent back. Did experts predict this? Well, they actually tried this out by asking people to predict what they thought would happen in each of the 3 treatments: no money, little money, and big money. And the economists, of course, said the more money, the wallet's not coming back, which is exactly the opposite from the pattern that we found. So this was a very cool experiment, but let's not try to repeat it again because that's a lot of wallets. Okay, I'm going to provide all of these slides to you later, but if that economic explanation doesn't hold, you can well imagine that the psychologists were feeling pretty good about this study because the psychological explanation is the more money, the worse you feel if you don't return it. And so their model of internal disutility fits quite well with this. Okay, so there is a lot more to this literature, but as I mentioned, it's still relatively new. And unfortunately, like much of experimental economics, it's focused on Western industrial nations for the most part. So most of what we think we know about honesty, dishonesty, cheating, and the cultural factors that affect it come from the US, sometimes the UK or France if we're very lucky. The wallet experiment is one of the few that looks globally, but you can well imagine that a lot of the findings may not relate to Indonesia, and you may have your own findings here, your own mechanisms that are important, and we don't know. because nobody has yet run one of these experiments here, and I hope it's one of you. But this isn't the end of the story. We stopped our experiment here in the class where you're answering questions through your phone in kind of an unsatisfactory way, where we landed at, okay, this is what the percentage of the classes who said they've ever used AI to cheat, but we're not totally sure if we can trust the results still. It feels unsatisfying. And we asked the question, what do we do if we're doing IFLS and we want to estimate it, but we can't anonymize? How can we somehow get an aggregate measure of the true dishonesty or corruption? There is a way. There is a way that we can do it. What I'd like you to do, by the way, if you actually have a coin, feel free to flip a coin, that's fine. But otherwise, go to Google, just on your browser or whatever, and type coin flip. And it will tell you heads or tails. It's a pretty simple Google app. Don't let anyone see it, but just remember whether you are heads or tails. If you want to flip an actual coin, old school, I like that too. And now we're going to do this. We're going to do another question. One second while I fiddle around. The question is, have you ever used AI to cheat on an assignment or test? If you flipped heads, you have to say yes. If you flip tails, I want you to answer honestly. Got it? Have you ever used AI to cheat on an assignment or test? If you flipped heads, you have to say yes. If you flip tails, I want you to answer honestly. Can everybody see it on their devices? Yes? Has anybody got any questions about what we're doing? One of the risks as an experimental economics lecturer is that I like to run experiments when I talk, but the risk with experiments is that sometimes they don't work. So let's see how we go. But look, that's the whole point of running experiments. If they don't work, you learn something too. Okay. So if you flipped heads, go to Google, coin flip. If you flipped heads, you said yes. If you flipped tails, you answered truthfully. And now we see the results. These are the results. Now, what are we supposed to do with those results? Well, look at those 43, 45 yeses. This is real time. 45 yeses and 9 no's. So because I'm bad at math, let's just say that's 50, right? It's not 50, but whatever. It's close enough to 50, okay? Oh, it's getting up. Okay, let's say it's 60. 60, okay? Of those 60, 30 flipped heads and said yes. We don't care about those, yeah? We only care about the rest. So out of that 49, 30 of them we don't care about. 29 of those, sorry, 20 of those are yeses, right? And 11 are no's. 20 yeses and 11 no's for real, which means approximately 2/3 of the class honestly said yes. So we've increased our percentage as we've gone through the methods. Now, what's really good about this is that even if somebody was looking over your shoulder and saw that you put in yes, there's no way for them to know which yes it was, right? Which means that in something like the IFLS, you can go around to someone's house and you can say to them, flip a coin and then come back and answer this question. And on average, you will get a close to truthful answer about sensitive topics. And sensitive topics, I've worked in, for instance, female circumcision, which I know is a big topic in Indonesia. It's an even bigger topic in East Africa, where they have more extreme version. I can't just go around to those households as a white man from Australia and say, hey, you circumcise your daughter? No, that's not going to work. But we did these sort of things, and it helps us in two ways. First, it gives us an accurate measure. And second, we can compare it to the direct survey question to estimate the bias. So if anybody else gives me their survey results, I know how to adjust them now because I've got a bias measure. Okay. So that's the randomized response technique, and I'll share that in the slides so you can have a look through that as we go. Okay. The last thing I'm going to talk to you about is beyond experiments, because so far everything we've done has involved some form of experimentation in the lab, in the field, some combination. But it would be really, really great if we had a setting where we could measure repeatedly for the same individual their likelihood of cheating on some task to do with decision making. But surely it can't exist, right? Well, it turns out chess is the answer. Now, you might say, well, chess has got nothing to do with the real world. Most people aren't chess players, so let's forget about it. Guess what? Chess.com has 220 million users, including 6 million Indonesians. It's a pretty large share of the world's population. When you play chess, your mobile phone and you together would beat the world champion 100 times out of 100, right? So the temptation to cheat in online chess is quite high for people. We can't tell for sure, but we can use advanced algorithms to match the percentage of moves that you claim you did by yourself with the percentage of moves that your phone would have done or a top computer would have done to get a continuous measure of the probability of cheating. And we can use that in different ways to understand whether boys cheat more than girls and how that gender gap differs across country, whether you're more likely to cheat if there's money involved or not, or maybe just personal milestones. Are you more likely to cheat on a day that's raining outside? Are you more likely to cheat on a Saturday? Are you less likely to cheat after prayers and all those sort of things? In fact, some of my students have used this chess data to measure just these things, and it could be you. But okay, we've learned how to measure and understand cheating. What we really care about as policymakers, and I know you're all going to go on to be great policymakers and influencers in various walks of life, can we actually make people more honest? Because the whole point behind this, if we're working, say, in the tax office or an insurance company, is there a way that we can encourage people to be more honest? Because of the chess domain, it's actually a perfect environment to try this out. Now, chess.com, it's quite a large tech company. I already told you how many members it's got. Its annual revenue is about 200 million US dollars per year, which is not bad for a board games company, essentially, right? They have various problems with cheating that they try to solve. Now, they're not economists, they're mainly developers. So they come to people like me with behavioral economics knowledge to design experiments to try to nudge their users to be more honest. Because if you're playing against someone and you feel like you're getting beaten because they're cheating, you feel pretty bad. If you've ever been in a situation where, say, you didn't get the best mark because others were cheating in your class and you knew about it, you feel awful, right? And if you feel awful, you leave the site. And if you leave the site, it costs them money. When we're talking about 220 million users, small nudges that change things by a fraction of a percent mean big dollars. So they had a problem that people were losing on purpose so that they could get paired against easier people in the next round, beat those people, and get these special gamified league points that lead to actual monetary prizes. So all you need to know about this, even if you don't know how to play chess, is that losing on purpose really quickly was a loophole to get monetary prizes and was driving honest people away from the site. And they wanted to know, is there a way that we could nudge people to stop doing this? And the reason that this nudges might work is because just like with crime, like robbery, kids don't start off stealing cars. Kids start off by stealing an energy drink from the Indomart. And then they might move up a little bit and steal some shoes. And then they might steal a bike and a phone. And before you know it, they're a 22-year-old engaged in the world of organized crime. It's a slippery slope of morality and dishonesty where your moral virtues get eaten away over time, which means your interventions can't come too late. They've got to be early to stop that slippery slope. So to do this, we designed an experiment, which we finished running at the end of last year. All the people within September to December of last year who were engaged in this sort of loophole cheating behavior were unknowingly involved in our experiment. We were watching all of their games, and when it looked like they were going down this slippery slope, that's when we hit them with the treatment intervention. And the treatment groups were 4 different messages that we tried, plus a control group, like any good experiment. The control group, no message. The treatment groups were messages sent to the in-app inbox right after you had most likely cheated in a game. And when you design your experiment, it's important to know in advance, how are you going to test whether it worked? What are your outcomes and how are you going to analyze it? You'll need that for your thesis. Here, the outcomes were whether the user was later banned by the platform's severe algorithm. That's sort of once they get to the stealing a car stage analogy. And whether their games exhibited this cheating-like behavior over time. That's a continuous outcome variable. So A, a 0-1 variable, B, a continuous outcome variable. There were 7,000 participants in the control group and about 2,500 in each of the treatment groups. After a game where we're pretty sure they were starting to cheat, they would get an inbox message that was either a direct warning based on your recent games, it appears you might be intentionally lowering your rating, blah, 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 blah. So it's speaking directly to you, a warning, don't do this. An indirect warning, we don't talk about you directly, but we say, we advise all of our users to periodically check our fair play conditions. A take a break one, which was no warning, but just said, hey, it looks like, you just lost that game very quickly. Why don't you take a break, come back later? And then finally, the big brother one. The big brother one, all we're trying to hint at is that, guess what? We do watch the games on the platform. You're not unobserved. And we sent it in different languages, and there's a few examples here in English and Polish where we sent it. So remember, we've got the control group, and we've got 4 treatment messages. Direct warning, indirect warning, no warning, but take a break, come back later. And then big brother, nothing about cheating at all, but guess what? We're watching you. Bit scary. So we've got 4 groups. Now, what's important from an economics perspective is that none of these should matter. A message shouldn't matter. Nothing's got to do with the probabilities. Nothing's got to do with the fines, the punishment, the incentives. So what do you think happened? Let's look at the likelihood that they were banned. Oh, no, I've asked you to actually tell me what you thought. Okay, let's do that. We'll go, this will be the last one, the last question that we'll do. We'll go to that same outcome and I'll put it up. You've got 4 options, I think. I want you to tell me, you can click multiple answers, at least I hope, which treatments worked, if any. Remember, we've got the direct warning, looks like you're cheating, don't do it or we'll catch you. The indirect warning, the take a break, and then the big brother, where we just tell you that we're watching. So I want you to guess which ones you think worked, if any. And then I'll tell you what my guess was. I'll have to tell you honestly, because this is a lecture about honesty, so I have to be honest. My hope was the big brother would be effective because it's the lightest touch. Yeah. I don't want to scare them off so that they're like, oh, I don't want to stay on this platform. They're a little bit mean here. I'm going to go to the competitor. I thought the lightest touch, just letting him know that we're watching him. If that works, That's the one we'll go for because it's the revenue maximizing one for the platform. But here are the results. Here are the results from the class. Direct is the most popular one, but no nudge work is also pretty high. People don't like indirect, take a break in Big Brother. Okay, so we're pretty split around the class, but I will tell you that the most popular one here, the direct one, is indeed the best one. So well done. Your intuition was right on cue. The direct treatment is the blue one in the middle, and this is the likelihood 40 days later that they were banned for extreme cheating. But interestingly, all of them worked in the short run. And if we'd stopped the experiment there, and most experiments are only very short, 30 days maximum, we would come to the conclusion that all of them are effective. And because the take a break and the Big Brother ones are the gentlest, maybe it makes sense to put those ones in play. However, we came back 7 months later to see whether these were temporary effects or permanent effects. And 7 months later, guess what? In every condition except for the direct one, they'd gone back to their old ways, unfortunately. So this is the first time this has been done, and we learned something. You can use a simple message without any credible punishment to change behavior, but it better be a direct warning, otherwise you won't have an effect. Okay. So thanks for your attention. A quick summary and recap. There's a lot that we don't know, and I'll draw your attention to the third bullet point there. You might have heard of so-called weird countries. I don't remember what all the letters stand for. I know that W is Western, and then you've got industrialized, democratic, and a few other things there. Unfortunately, that's the way in literature. It's very much US focused, but it also means there's a lot of scope. And the good news is that over the last 12 years, all these researchers have fine-tuned the methodology so that now the toolkit is ready and you can use it. And it's relatively straightforward to implement these things. So when it gets time for your thesis, if you're interested in this world and this literature, it is relatively straightforward to run these experiments yourself. And I really encourage you to do so. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your questions. Okay, so we have some time now for some questions. So any questions you have, please let me know. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. We still have actually 10 minutes for your presentation. If you
Oh,
want to like expand more, or
Oh.
you can do it here.
Yeah, okay. I'll mention one thing. It's always risky for a lecturer to go off script, but I'll tell you one thing. About 8 years ago, there was a very famous experiment that was done in conjunction with an insurance company. And what they did was they got people to sign, new customers, to sign an honesty pledge saying that you know, all this information about me is true before you get your insurance premium. And you had a choice to sign your name at the top or the bottom of the form. What they found is that if you got your customers to sign their name at the top, they were way more honest later on than those who signed it at the bottom in terms of false claims. And this was repeated everywhere. Harvard researcher involved, Duke University researcher involved, and many huge international insurance companies adopted this approach. And in fact, these two researchers, the Harvard and Duke ones, became so famous as a result that they wrote books on honesty. They became the world's most foremost honesty researchers in the world, top-selling New York bestseller books. And one of them even has a Netflix show with the main character based after him as a behavioral economist fighting crime, right? Last year, it turns out that they faked the data in their experiments. So the world's top researchers on honesty are dishonest and cheated. And they tried to replicate, other researchers came to try to replicate this signing at the top, and as your intuition would probably tell you. It has absolutely no effect. And in fact, now over a dozen of their papers have been retracted. Now, on the one hand, that is a massive blow to science and to all the money that's been invested on the basis of their results, not to mention a stupid Netflix show, right? But on the other hand, it means that there's still a lot of scope, a lot of things that we don't know that we thought we did know as well. So anyway, that's my last little tidbit. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, any questions from the audience here? Again, kalau nggak confident berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris, silakan bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia. You can always ask in Indonesian. Anyone? Okay.
Untuk aktif di Indonesia juga saya
Sure.
perkenalkan saya dari Bangka. Saya ingin bertanya penggunaan dishonesty atau cheating ini dalam konteks perekonomian. Kan sebelumnya itu cukup besar ya, karena itu di makroekonomi. Bagaimana kalau kita itu tuh bisa mereplikasi ke apa namanya penelitian ini tapi dalam bentuk menguntungkan perusahaan. Contohnya kalau kita di e-commerce itu tuh sistem COD itu tuh hal yang paling sering kita keluhkan baik dari pihak pembeli, penjual ataupun salah satu di antara keduanya seperti pihak pengirim. Yang ingin saya tanyakan apakah mungkin untuk membuat suatu mekanisme di mana penggunaan yang seperti eksperimen wallet itu tuh bisa dilakukan dalam sistem e-commerce ya gitu. Terima kasih.
Okay, so Bayu here is asking whether the cheating or dishonesty experiment can be applied in the e-commerce setting, because here we have what's called the cash on delivery scheme. So you pay for the goods once the item is being delivered to your house. And there have been cases where the sellers or the buyers cheating, basically. So what do you think about it, like applying dishonesty experiments for e-commerce?
Yeah, so thanks for your question. The good thing about e-commerce, or in fact, most e-platforms, is that because the scale is so large, it's quite easy to run experiments on your own platform. So for instance, for chess.com, which is not e-commerce, but it's an online platform, running this experiment was less than a day's work to set up. It's very easy to set up. So for platforms, and here I'm thinking about Amazon, just because I don't know the Indonesian context as well, but to set up such a platform where you add either behavioral nudges or structural changes, you simply randomize that across users, and then you measure as your outcome how many complaints there are afterwards. And it's very easy from there to work out what works or what not. A lot of people don't realize this, but for those of you getting your economics degrees, the number 2 biggest hirer of economists is Amazon, and Facebook is not far behind. In fact, the Facebook team that was in charge of running experiments was once asked by a journalist, how many Facebook users have ever been in an experiment without their knowledge? And he said, 100% every day. So running experiments is very easy to do, and it could definitely be done in e-commerce. In fact, I would be surprised if they're not actually doing it. Yeah.
Jadi itu kita membuat kayak mungkin agak terkesan stereotip ya, tapi ada kemungkinan bahwa kita bisa mengidentifikasi dari sekitar 38 provinsi, di mana provinsi mana aja sih yang yang mungkin memiliki tingkat pengembalian atau tingkat COD yang buruk dan provinsi mana yang dia tingkat COD-nya paling baik. Dan kita hubungkan dengan indeks pembangunan manusianya juga sehingga itu jadi mungkin kita kan bisa bilang bahwa itu tuh berkorelasi ya, tapi anggap aja itu tuh mungkin ada sebab akibat dari indeks pembangunan dan terhadap ke tingkat keberhasilan dari sistem COD tersebut. Gitu.
Tadi berarti komentar atau nambah lagi boleh gitu kan Pak? Smerdon mungkin ya buat dikembangin lagi. Jadi kita ngecek per provinsi.
Okay. So he's basically saying that there is a design of his study that relates between the cheating per provinces because they have the data for each provinces and how it is related with indicators like the Human Development Index. So that's one of the possibility to do that research, or what is your suggestions?
So are you saying there's already data on this, or they're not?
Oh, not
or
yet,
you'd
not
be,
yet.
yes, not for sure. So most of the research on this topic, which is the correlation between human development or economic growth and cheating and dishonesty, is done at the country level. So they're comparing across, say, 50 countries. Now, 50 is not a very big sample size, and countries are very different from each other. So this is quite risky research. Comparing across provinces in Indonesia, or if you can get data, villages, is way more powerful because they all come from an Indonesian context. So you're controlling for a lot of the similarities. And you have really good village level data in Indonesia. Some of you are familiar with this village potential survey. What's the name in Indonesian for it? Is it
PODES,
PODES.
Potensi Desa.
Yeah. So if somehow the government could be convinced to include some cheating or honesty questions into their next PODES survey, that would make for not just powerful research for Indonesia, but it would be a world first. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question, probably. Anyone? I saw some hands raised, but now it's not.
Oh,
Which one?
there was one over there.
Oh.
There's one at the back as well. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Christina. I'm from Malawi. I would first of all like to comment how that was a very good lecture. And you talked about how people usually navigate between the short-term wins of cheating and the long-term wins of honesty. So, for instance, you would be a student and you're looking for the higher grade in that moment, and they cheat to get the higher grade. That's in the short term. And then in the long term, they have to be honest. So I would love to know, is there any recommendations that have been there as to how you actually navigate the trade-off between the short-term win and the long-term win of the honesty? How do you navigate that trade-off? Thank you.
That's a very good question. I know there are some students here who were in the lecture I gave on Tuesday. One of the things I said there, which will be a little bit of my answer here, is that as economists, our job is not to project our values onto our recommendations. Our job is always to do the analysis objectively and say, we think this is going to happen, this is a forecast, or if you change this, then this will happen. But values and morals, that's for the politicians, if they have any, right? It's not for us. Our job is analysis. So some of your question, I think, goes to that moral argument, to which my answer is a student should always be honest, always, and that's the end of the story. But if I was to try to give you what I know about it from an objective point of view as an outsider, yeah, it's what we do know for sure is that there are two things that lead to a long-term pattern of dishonesty. The first is dipping your toe in the water, is what we say in English. Just trying it a little bit, and then a little bit more, seeing if I get caught. And over time, that grows. The second thing is believing that people around you are cheating and getting an advantage over you. Because we're humans, we compare ourselves to each other. And if others are benefiting over us through dishonest means, we feel, well, why not? We have to keep up. So it's not really an answer to your question, but from a policymaker perspective, from a lecturer or a UGM administrator perspective, and that's what I'm always thinking about now that I'm a lecturer in a world where students use ChatGPT, we need to be really careful about these two things. So it's not going to satisfy you as an answer, but I'm trying to keep my own values out of it. That's the best that I can do. Thanks for your question.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll ask you Indonesia.
Sure.
Saya Siska. Oke, saya Siska. Saya saat ini sedang tertarik tidak hanya di behavioral economics tapi juga personal finance gitu. Dan yang yang membuat saya penasaran begitu terkait dengan personal finance itu adalah saya sebagai orang yang bertanya ke orang yang klien saya lah istilahnya klien saya itu saya tidak bisa memastikan bahwa dia itu jujur atau tidak ketika dia melaporkan atau menceritakan terkait dengan keuangan pribadinya. Contoh misalnya dia bisa saja cerita bahwa utang dia misalnya sekian, tapi ternyata lebih banyak begitu. Nah, dari David sendiri, apakah mungkin memiliki semacam tips begitu untuk istilahnya mengantisipasi klien yang sekiranya dia itu tidak benar-benar jujur menceritakan terkait dengan personal record finance-nya.
So Siska here is a personal finance advisor. Is it advisor? Yeah, advisor, and she suspects that some of her clients may be not telling truthfully about their assets, about their debt, and she asked for like tips and what is your suggestion to, I don't know, how to make them revealing honestly about their debt, assets, and so on. So that's the question.
Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't claim that I have the expertise to give that sort of personal advice. There is a psychological literature about psychological tricks and tips you can use to try to get more honest answers, also to do with body language, facial expressions. Actually, most of this psychology literature is related to dating. So if you meet someone for a date for the first time, that first date, it's quite tempting to give a, shall we say, more exaggerated perspective of your good traits. And so a lot of that literature goes into those sort of situations or also job interview situations. It's not my it's not my area, so I don't want to comment too much. I can say that these techniques like the coin flip technique, the anonymous thing, like that sort of stuff gives a pretty good measure academically, but it probably doesn't make such sense for your situation. So I'm sorry, I can't help very much. Yeah.
Berarti kalau begitu untuk pribadi begitu itu tidak works, tapi untuk penelitian mungkin dalam populasi tertentu kita bisa menggunakan cara coin flip tadi mungkin bisa.
Yeah. Basically saying that the coin flip method is more appropriate for academic setting,
Yes.
but not on like personal level.
Yeah.
Thanks to
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. In general, studies have found that people are more likely to give you honest answers if they are not tired. When we're tired, we're more likely to be dishonest. The end of a day, we're more likely to be dishonest. When we're hungry, we're more likely to be dishonest. But these are all very small effects. So yeah.
Okay, anyone have Pak Rimawan, finally the
there-
lecturer in experimental economics.
There's a gentleman at the back as well. I haven't
Yeah.
forgotten about you. Right at
Okay.
the back on the right. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, David. It is fascinating, and it's remind me about some methodological challenge that we have in economics of crime. Usually in economic of crime, we estimated the social cost of crime, and that is from the reported and unreported one, reported crime and unreported. For the reported crime, of course, we can get the data from the police and things like that. And for the unreported, it usually in in the UK and also in Australia as well, they run victimization survey. Now, if that is related to the conventional crime, we don't have any problem. That's because the victims in there, and we know that, and they can honestly mention about that. But then the problem is in corruption, because in the corruption, it might be a bribery, but it might also be extortion or embezzlement. Now, so far we don't have we don't do any survey on the corruption. But then when you mention about there is an opportunity to estimate or to make a correction about who will how many proportion that actually will be honest, then it just come across to my mind, will it be possible to run the not victimization survey, but it's survey on the corruption, in a sense that we probably, if we ask, are you the victims of extortion, people will say honestly. But then the question is that the challenge is that whether the same individual committed bribery to police or to officer.
Yeah.
Is there any chance here to, I don't know, how there's probably to do that kind of survey, but then we use the result from your experiment to make some kind of a correction about how far actually that the incident itself.
Yeah. So it's a really good question. I think for sure, yes, that we have the tools to do that now. So the work that I did in East Africa, in Somalia, about female circumcision, that's a very sensitive topic to talk about there. So we tried all these different methods to collect the answers, and we could measure the differences in the biases. In the lecture I gave on Tuesday, we talked about discrimination in an Indonesian context, and if one was to ask about your opinion or beliefs or impression about the Chinese Indonesian minority, I wouldn't trust a survey, right? Because it's a very sensitive topic. But using these techniques to elicit it, I think would be quite powerful. One thing that we know for sure, though, is that a very, very powerful intervention tool is correcting the beliefs on a topic when most of the public have really no idea of what's going on. And this is a good example here. Like, we have the class here basically scattered almost uniformly 0 to 100. Like, nobody has a good idea. Why would we? We have no data on it. Why would we? A really powerful tool is asking people to estimate their beliefs and then showing them a credible data on what the true ones are, and they update and they change their behavior. So that could be something. The problem is it can go both ways, because if they underestimate, if they say, oh, there's no bribery, and you tell them, oh yeah, 50% of people do it, well, then that's going to push them up. So you don't want to do that. But you can use it the other way selectively. Yeah, it's quite powerful. It's a really good question. Yeah. There was one gentleman at the back who had his hand up for ages. So
Yeah, me.
Oh, it was another guy, but you can go as well.
Okay, thank you so
You
much
might go,
for your presentation and sharing, Mr. Smerdon. My name is Fitra. Maybe this is just a basic question. Like in Indonesia, there are a lot of student and even lecturer, I believe it, that use AI like ChatGPT, Grok, and others. I think it's not for like cheating,
Yeah.
but I think it's survival on the system, because there is a limit time, and also like deadline is short time like that. So what do you
Yep.
think about that? That's it.
Really good question. Maybe other lecturers, but this one, no, but it's a really good question because, come on, do you think I made this picture by myself? No, I took my photo, I gave it to ChatGPT, and I said, "Turn me into Pinocchio," and it gave me this. But more seriously, to answer your question, there's actually an article that came out very recently about this, where some lecturers were caught running their student assignments through ChatGPT for grading. And most worryingly is not that they got caught, it's that they saw nothing wrong with it. They were asked and they said, well, of course, I have too much work to do. I'm overworked. I have too little time. Other lecturers are doing it. It's not morally wrong. So the biggest risk with AI now, I think, is that there are people who don't see a problem with it. And if those people cheat, others will see them, and those others wouldn't have cheated, but they will cheat. And we have models in economics called tipping point models. Once there is a certain percentage, large enough percentage engaging in a behavior, suddenly it makes no sense for you to be the minority. And you end up with a vast majority who otherwise would have been honest becoming dishonest, which is why in some countries you have a very low bribery rate. In some countries, it's not, you have no choice. You have to do it, basically. It's become the norm. So these norms change in this way. So, I'm not going to pretend that I have the answers to the AI problem because it is a massive problem, but it's actually something that I study by using my students in surveys, using the tools that we talked about. So when I just did this with you, like, how have you ever used AI to cheat? Let's flip a coin. I'm doing that with my students because I want to know the true amount and I want to know why they're doing it. And I want them to be safe enough to give me honest answers. But the research is, at the moment, still trying to catch up. Yeah, great question. Yep. This one gentleman at the back. Yep.
Check. Thank you. First of all, I will say thank you for you, David, for your lecture. And there was a interesting field study from Con and before field experiment, civic honesty around the globe in 40 countries. Yeah, right. In this research, I have some eureka, some follow-up question that didn't notice from the experiment. Con just make experiment that wallet and spreading in some another place, but he doesn't spreading in poor area or rich area. Now this very interesting research for future research that can make and follow up this con research. And can possible we do it in Indonesian and I think it's just this question, and the important question is how much elo you have in chess.com. I think it's important question because I player from chess.com too, so I will to know it. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. So you're one of the 6 million Indonesians who use chess.com. There's probably more in the room too. So your question about can we measure honesty through things like the wallet experiment in richer areas, poorer areas, rural areas, urban areas, is a great question. It hasn't been done because this experiment is so expensive to do. It's so expensive because you're literally giving money in the wallets. But using the tools that we've done today, the simpler tools, combined with something like IFLS or any of the great surveys that are done by the Indonesian government or the Statistics Bureau, would be a very, very powerful tool to measure these things. And one of the reasons it would be so important to measure it in an Indonesian context, one of the things that Pak Rimawan and others have done, well, particularly Rimawan, is to put some dollar amounts on the costs of crime and corruption. But you can also think about it the other way. Can we put a dollar amount on the benefits of honesty? Because if we can find that there are villages where certain things increase honesty, maybe say having a community hall with activities, maybe having a communal childcare program, or any of these sort of things that otherwise we just see as a cost. If we can put money, a dollar amount on the benefit and say, hey, honesty has increased in this society because of this community infrastructure or social infrastructure that is equal to this many dollars in another village that doesn't have it, we can start putting true value onto things with social benefit that the average economist before didn't care about. So you're in a good place because you've got people working at UGM who are kind of pioneers on this topic, and you have these data and surveys in Indonesia that are not run at the same scale or quality in almost any other developing country. So you have the infrastructure to answer these questions, that good questions that you're asking that nobody has ever answered before. So I don't know the answer, but I hope that one of you goes and finds it for me. That would be nice. On the chess question, my hilo is 2450. It was above 2500, and then I became a father and it went down. So there's a that's correlation, right? Not a causal effect. Okay, thanks for your question. Yeah.
And you still have, we actually have past 5 minutes, 6 minutes past 3 p.m. for the schedule of this lecture. But if you don't mind, we can still open to questions. Otherwise, we can go. Is there anyone still want to ask questions? Yes.
Maybe we'll take maybe just two more, one and then one at the back. Is that okay? Yeah. The last two questions.
Okay. So cold in here. My name is Mohammad Rizky. I was an active investor stocks in Indonesia. I think there is people have new information than me. That's we call it orang dalam in Indonesia. Nah,
Insiders.
Okay.
insiders. The
Yeah.
insiders can make opportunity move than me,
Yeah.
and I can do that. How about it? What do you think about the opportunity they get from the news information than me? Sedangkan saya harus menggunakan some tools untuk menganalisis pergerakannya.
Yeah, so basically, he's fighting against insiders. So what he can do? What do you do?
I have a lot of sympathy for you, I would say. Do you know, I didn't study economics in my undergraduate, actually. I studied mathematics and psychology, and I joined the Australian Treasury. It's a bit like your central bank, the Treasury. And they put me in the section that was in the financial markets section, which was mainly just lawyers, people who studied law, because there was no action there, just changing the act, changing the regulation. And they put me in because they wanted somebody who wasn't a lawyer, who maybe understood something about numbers. So they put me in there. And one of my jobs was actually insider trading regulation. But I got distracted very quickly because I joined in 2008, and then the subprime mortgage crisis happened, the global financial crisis. And unfortunately, our team of 6 people was in charge of regulation for credit default swaps, collateralized debt obligations, short selling, and I was the closest we had to a numbers guy. So as a 17-year-old, I was in charge of Australia's policy response to this global financial crisis, which was not good for the country, I think. But I mention this because I started in insider trading. When it comes to financial markets, what we can say is that the classical models on average do pretty well. And the reason is it really just comes down to money. And if you sacrifice money for honesty, you will just get pushed out, because most of the financial world is focused on one outcome variable, profit maximization. For that reason, when it comes to things like insider trading, these psychological nudges, these please don't do it direct warning things are not going to make any difference, in my opinion. We have to go back to the classical model, which is either increase the punishments or increase the probability of getting caught. That's what the classical model says, and that's my opinion on financial markets. Okay, was the last question at the back, I think? Yep. I think it was this gentleman back on the, yeah.
Okay, my question is a little bit more philosophical.
That's a good way to finish on
I
a
have
philosophical.
questions. I have two questions. First question is, when people being honest, some people base it on religion, but there are so many different religions and they have different values. And some people base it on law, but there are difference. Law is relative among every country. And so what are the urges? If honesty is so relative, what are the urges? What are the importance? Okay, my next question is there some aspects that we can cheat on, especially, for example, if it brings more benefit for the people than harm? Thank you.
Thanks for your questions. They are indeed philosophical. And just like with the question from the student from Malawi, I will try not to put my moral opinion, project it too much, because I'm just one opinion. I'll just try to give more of an objective answer. The first thing about religion is really interesting, because one of the first findings in the honesty literature was they did an experiment where before you did the die under the cup task, you either read some text from a novel or you read the 10 Commandments from the Bible. Now, this was done in the US in a religious state. And if you read the 10 Commandments, you reported lower rolls of the die. Fantastic result. The two researchers who did this are the two I told you about before, who faked the data. And so after they were discovered for this, they tried the same thing again. Other researchers said, wait, let's go back and try this again. 10 Commandments don't make any difference. No difference at all. However, I think that religion is a really unexplored question. And particularly in a society like Indonesia, where religion is much more central than it is in, say, America or Australia, it's a very open question. And so when I mentioned before, you know, are you more honest before prayer or after prayer? To me, it seems like a very simple and perhaps relevant question to answer, very easy to test, very easy to test. We could run it this afternoon and have the answer. No one's ever done it before. So I don't want to wade in too much to the philosophical answer to that one, but I would say that religion remains incredibly underexplored, and particularly, you know, in a country here, it would make a lot of sense to look into that. On the second question, which is about, does it make any sense to cheat for any dimensions? Are there any ways that we can justify benefits? I think you'll find that a lot of people, when they do cheat, they find some way to rationalize it. They find some way to justify it, whether or not it's correct. I don't want to say what's right or wrong, but the parents' example is a good one. If you can justify it by saying, hey, I'm doing something dishonest or cheating, but it's for my children, you're much more likely to do it. And evolutionary psychology gives us some rationale for that. It says that if it benefits someone who's close to us, a father, a son, a brother, even our neighbor, we're more likely to be able to justify it in that way. Is that good or bad? I don't know, but it remains an open question. And I guess seeing as I'm wrapping up now, I'd say that like if there's one takeaway from this, it's that there's so much that we don't know. And I really hope that some of you go off and find those answers for us. Okay, thanks.
So thank you so much, David, for the presentation, for the lecture, and for being with us here this evening. So once again, let's give a round of applause.
Yes. Yes.
So thank you, everyone, for the lecture. Hopefully you find something interesting and important, and also motivating you to do experiments. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Actually, I did an experiment like comparing.
We have a token of appreciation.
Oh,
for you.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, thank you very much. We can talk about it in a moment. Oh, should I come down? There we go. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you.
So this one as well.
Oh, I'll hold them both. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Smaller.
We can trade it.
I did an experiment actually that this Ramadan is this.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
We find nothing.
Oh, yeah?
So basically fasting during Ramadan and after Ramadan is very different. In terms of donations, in terms of social behavior and so on.
So what about prayer? Doesn't make any difference.
No,
You
not
look at
about
the
prayer as one role, I think,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah,
like
okay.
religious really do that as well.
Yeah.
It has no impact.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah, that's interesting. Again, if I'm not mistaken, during Ramadan, during the time, people do antisocial behavior more. They burn money, so it's like a money burning thing. More than on average, more than outside of Ramadan. Maybe because of the small sample size. That's what we found.
That's really interesting. I have a paper that looks at test playing before Ramadan, during Ramadan, after
Yeah.
Ramadan. Mainly looking at not honesty though, looking at just their performance. Like, does fasting affect your brain?
Yeah.
And what I find is that Muslim players, they just change the time that they play chess. They don't play during fasting, but they wait till after Jannah. And then they play it and they do fine. Yeah.
No difference in
Yeah.
performance. Like,
No, but there is a
Really?
change in like
Yeah,
behavior.
it's
So, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. We
Oh,
still
well.
have like writing the working paper on it.
Yeah,